I watched in absolute horror as two police officers grabbed my 8-year-old daughter by her arms. Emma was screaming, tears streaming down her face as they tried to drag her away from our own ranch. The officers were following orders from a 911 call that claimed my little girl was a dangerous trespasser who needed to be removed immediately. Standing across the fence line, Corinne Mitchell watched with a satisfied smile on her face. She had finally found the perfect weapon to destroy our family. What she did not know was that I was racing home in my patrol car, emergency lights flashing, my radio crackling with urgent backup requests. As I pulled into my driveway and stepped out in my full sheriff's uniform, Corinne's smug expression melted into pure terror. The woman who had spent months trying to destroy a law enforcement officer's family was about to learn that some fights you simply cannot win. That was the moment everything changed forever. My name is David Rodriguez, and 3 years ago I thought I had found paradise. After spending 15 years working my way up through law enforcement in the city, I had finally saved enough money to buy my dream property. 15 acres of rolling pasture land, complete with a small barn and enough space for my daughter Emma and me to build the life I had always imagined. Emma was only 5 when we moved to the ranch, but she took to country life like she was born for it. Every morning before school, we would walk out to the pasture together to feed our 3 horses. Bella, Shadow, and Thunder had become more than just animals to us. They were family. Emma would giggle as Thunder nuzzled her shoulder, looking for the apple slices she always carried in her jacket pocket. The ranch sat on a gentle hill overlooking miles of open countryside. From our front porch, you could watch the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The only sounds were birds singing, horses moving through the grass, and Emma's laughter echoing across the fields. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had dreamed of giving my daughter after her mother passed away when she was just 3 years old. My job kept me busy, sometimes requiring long hours or emergency calls at odd times. But being a county sheriff meant I was protecting the very community where Emma and I had chosen to build our lives. The work was demanding, but it gave me purpose. More importantly, it allowed us to afford this slice of heaven where Emma could grow up surrounded by nature, learning responsibility and respect for the land. 6 months ago, everything began to change. The rolling hills to the south of our property were sold to a development company. Almost overnight, construction crews began building what would become Meadowbrook Estates. The marketing signs promised luxury living with perfectly manicured lawns and upscale amenities. Within months, identical houses began sprouting across what had once been open pasture. I installed new fencing along our southern property line to clearly mark the boundaries between our ranch and the new development. The fence was not just practical, it was symbolic. On one side lay our world of horses, hay bales, and honest country living. On the other side rose a neighborhood of perfect lawns, identical mailboxes, and houses that looked like they had been stamped from the same cookie cutter. Emma and I watched from our kitchen window as moving trucks brought new families to Meadowbrook Estates. Most of our neighbors seemed pleasant enough. They would wave as they drove past our property, and a few even stopped to admire our horses. I hoped we could all coexist peacefully, respecting each other's choices about how to live. I was wrong. Corinne Mitchell arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, driving a white BMW with temporary license plates. I was repairing a section of fence when I first saw her examining her new house like a general surveying a battlefield. She was a woman in her early 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and clothes that probably cost more than most people spend on rent. Everything about her screamed control and judgment. Within a week of moving in, Karen had established herself as the unofficial queen of Meadowbrook Estates. She carried a leather notebook everywhere she went, documenting every minor violation of what she considered proper suburban living. I watched her measure grass heights with an actual ruler, photograph garbage cans that were placed 3 feet from where she thought they should be, and knock on doors to inform neighbors about violations they did not even know existed. Karen's house sat directly across from our ranch, giving her a perfect view of our daily activities. She would stand at her front window with binoculars, watching Emma and me care for our horses. At first, I thought she was simply curious about rural life. I was wrong about that too. The first confrontation happened on a Saturday morning. Emma was playing near our fence line, picking wildflowers to make a bouquet for our kitchen table. She was singing softly to herself, completely absorbed in her innocent task, when Karen marched across her perfectly trimmed lawn. "Excuse me," Karen called out in a voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Your child is disturbing the peace of our neighborhood." I walked over from the barn, keeping my voice calm and respectful. "I am sorry. Is there a problem?" Karen's eyes narrowed as she looked from me to Emma, who had stopped singing and was now hiding behind my legs. "Your daughter was making noise. This is a quiet residential area, not some barnyard where children can run wild and scream at all hours." "She was not screaming," I replied, feeling my jaw tighten. "She was singing quietly while picking flowers on our own property." "Your property," Karen said with obvious disdain, "is bringing down the value of every home in this development. Do you have any idea how much these houses cost? Do you understand that families pay premium prices to live in a controlled, upscale environment?" I could feel Emma pressing closer to my leg, confused by the anger in this stranger's voice. "Ma'am, we have every right to use our property as we see fit, as long as we are not breaking any laws or ordinances." Karen pulled out her notebook and began writing furiously. "We will see about that. I am Karen Mitchell, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I have connections throughout this county, and I will not allow a ramshackle farm operation to destroy what we have built here." Over the following weeks, Karen's behavior escalated from hostile to obsessive. She began taking photographs of our property from her side of the fence, sometimes using a telephoto lens to capture details of our barn, vehicles, and daily activities. She would stand at the fence line with a measuring tape, documenting everything from the height of our grass to the placement of our fence posts. I discovered that Karen was also conducting surveillance on other neighbors, building files on everyone in the development. She had appointed herself as the sole authority on what constituted proper living, and she was determined to enforce her vision regardless of actual HOA rules or county ordinances. The final straw came when Karen cornered Emma while I was inside getting lunch ready. Through the kitchen window, I saw my daughter backing away from the fence as Karen pointed her finger and spoke in animated, angry gestures. By the time I reached them, Emma was crying. I told her that horses are dirty animals that do not belong near decent homes. Karen explained matter-of-factly when I demanded to know what she had said to my daughter. "Children need to learn that their actions affect other people." As I comforted Emma, Karen delivered her final warning. "I am giving you one last chance to be reasonable, Mr. Rodriguez. Find somewhere else to keep your animals, or I will do whatever it takes to solve this problem myself. I have resources and connections that you cannot imagine. Do not test me." That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked me why the angry lady did not like our horses. I did not have a good answer for her. What I did have was a growing certainty that Karen Mitchell was not finished with us. The first attack came disguised as a concerned citizen report. I was at work when my phone rang with a call from the county code enforcement office. They had received a noise complaint about our property, claiming that our livestock was creating excessive disturbance during quiet hours. "Mr. Rodriguez, we have to follow up on all complaints," the inspector explained apologetically when he arrived that afternoon. "Someone reported that your horses are making noise all night long, disturbing the sleep of nearby residents." I walked him around the property, showing him our 3 gentle horses grazing peacefully in the afternoon sun. The inspector shook his head and made notes on his clipboard. "Sir, these animals are clearly well cared for and not causing any noise issues. Horses make normal horse sounds during the day. That is not a violation of any noise ordinance." 2 days later, another inspector arrived. This time, the complaint alleged zoning violations, claiming that we were operating a commercial horse boarding facility in a residential area. Again, I had to take time off work to meet with county officials and prove that we owned 3 horses for personal use, not commercial purposes. "This is harassment," the zoning inspector told me privately as he prepared to leave. "Someone is trying to cause you problems by filing false reports. These complaints are clearly frivolous, but we have to investigate every one." The pattern continued weekly. Karen had obviously researched every possible avenue for causing us trouble. She filed reports with animal control, claiming our horses were neglected or mistreated. She contacted the health department, alleging that our barn was creating sanitary issues. She even called the fire department, claiming we were storing hay in a dangerous manner. Each false report meant another inspector, another afternoon lost from work, another conversation where I had to defend our right to live peacefully on our own property. The stress was exhausting, but what worried me most was the effect on Emma. My daughter began to associate any unfamiliar car in our driveway with trouble. When inspectors arrived, she would hide in her room, afraid that someone was coming to take away our horses. The ranch that had once felt like a sanctuary was beginning to feel like a place under siege. The harassment escalated when Karen began confronting Emma directly. One afternoon, I came home from work to find my daughter sitting on our front porch, tears streaming down her face. "The angry lady yelled at me again," Emma sobbed as I pulled her into my arms. "She said I was a bad girl for riding Thunder near the fence. She said she was going to make sure we could not keep our horses anymore." My blood boiled as Emma described how Karen had approached the fence while she was riding and began screaming about property values and inappropriate activities. The fact that a grown woman would verbally attack an 8-year-old child over imaginary grievances was beyond my comprehension. I immediately called the HOA management company, hoping to file a complaint about Karen's behavior. The representative was polite but unhelpful. "Mrs. Mitchell is our HOA president, and she has not violated any association rules. Property line disputes are civil matters that have to be resolved between neighbors." Karen's campaign expanded beyond false reports to building a coalition against us. I discovered she was going door to door throughout Meadowbrook Estates, spreading lies about our family, and trying to convince other residents that our ranch was somehow dangerous to their property values. "She told us you were running some kind of illegal business," one neighbor confided. "She claimed you had dozens of horses and were planning to expand into a full commercial operation. When I told her I had only seen 3 horses, she insisted that you were hiding the others." The lies were becoming more elaborate and harder to disprove. Karen had learned that the most effective way to destroy someone's reputation was through whisper campaigns and half-truths that spread faster than facts. The breaking point came when animal control officers arrived with a warrant to inspect our horses for signs of neglect and abuse. The officers were professional and thorough, but I could see the embarrassment in their eyes as they conducted an obviously unnecessary investigation. "Mr. Rodriguez, these are some of the healthiest, best cared for horses I have seen," the lead officer told me as they prepared to leave. "Whoever reported this either has no knowledge of proper horse care or is deliberately filing false reports." That evening, as I sat on our front porch watching Emma brush Thunder's mane, I realized that Corinne's harassment campaign was not random harassment. It was a calculated strategy designed to make our lives so miserable that we would voluntarily leave. She was betting that a single father with a demanding job would eventually give up rather than continue fighting her endless stream of false complaints and bureaucratic attacks. She was wrong about that too. On the morning that changed everything forever, I received an emergency call that required my immediate attention at the county courthouse. A situation involving multiple agencies needed the sheriff's oversight, and I could not delegate the responsibility. Emma was safely in the care of Miguel, our trusted ranch hand who had been helping us maintain the property for 2 years. Miguel was a gentle man in his 60s who had worked with horses his entire life. Emma adored him, and he treated her like his own granddaughter. When I left that morning, Emma and Miguel were planning to give the horses a thorough grooming before letting them out into the far pasture. I had been at the courthouse for less than an hour when Miguel's panicked call came through on my cell phone. "Sheriff Rodriguez, you need to come home right now." Miguel's voice was shaking with fear and anger. "The police are here, and they are trying to take Emma away. That woman from across the fence called them and told them Emma is trespassing and threatening people." My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean they are trying to take Emma away?" "Two officers are here. They said they got a 911 call about a dangerous child who was running wild and threatening residents. They want to remove Emma from the property immediately. I tried to explain that she is on her own land, but they said they have to follow the complaint." I was already running toward my patrol car as Miguel continued. "Sheriff, Emma is terrified. She does not understand why the police want to take her away from home. The woman is standing in her yard watching everything with a big smile on her face." The drive home felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. My radio crackled with dispatch communications, but all I could think about was my little girl being terrorized by officers responding to Corinne's lies. I called ahead to dispatch, identifying myself and requesting backup at my home address for an ongoing domestic situation. When I arrived, the scene was even worse than I had imagined. Two patrol officers were attempting to coax Emma away from our front porch while she clung to one of our porch posts, sobbing uncontrollably. Miguel stood nearby, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture while trying to reason with the officers. "Emma is not trespassing," I could hear Miguel saying. "This is her home. She lives here with her father. There has been some kind of mistake." One of the officers, a young man I did not recognize, was growing impatient. "Sir, we received a 911 call reporting a child who was running wild on private property and threatening residents. We have been instructed to remove the child immediately for the safety of the community." Emma's terrified cries cut through me like a knife. My 8-year-old daughter was experiencing the trauma of being treated like a criminal by police officers who were supposed to protect and serve. The injustice of the situation filled me with a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. Across the fence line, Corinne Mitchell stood in her perfectly manicured yard, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with obvious satisfaction. She had orchestrated this nightmare scenario, weaponizing law enforcement against an innocent child to achieve her petty goals of forcing us to leave. The second officer was trying to be more gentle with Emma, but his patience was also wearing thin. "Sweetheart, we just need you to come with us so we can sort this out. No one is going to hurt you, but you cannot stay here if you are trespassing." "She is not trespassing," Miguel said again, his voice rising with frustration. "This is her property. Her father owns this ranch." "Sir, I am going to need you to step back," the first officer warned Miguel. "If you continue to interfere with our investigation, I will have to place you under arrest for obstruction." That was when my radio crackled with the call that would change everything. "All units, we have a request for backup at 847 Meadowbrook Lane. Sheriff Rodriguez is en route and requesting immediate assistance with a domestic situation." The first officer looked at his partner with confusion. Did dispatch just say Sheriff Rodriguez? As I pulled into my driveway, emergency lights flashing, I could see the exact moment when everyone realized what was happening. The officers straightened up and stepped away from Emma. Miguel's face showed relief mixed with anticipation. Emma looked toward my patrol car with desperate hope. But it was Corinne's reaction that I will never forget. The satisfied smile vanished from her face, replaced by an expression of absolute horror as she recognized the sheriff's department vehicle and the man stepping out in full uniform. I walked toward my daughter with measured, professional steps, my badge clearly visible, my authority unmistakable. Emma broke free from the porch post and ran into my arms, still sobbing but finally safe. "Officers," I said in my official capacity, "I am Sheriff David Rodriguez. This is my daughter Emma, and this is my property. I believe we need to discuss the nature of the complaint that brought you here." The power dynamic had shifted in an instant, and everyone present knew it. Corinne Mitchell had just discovered that the family she had been tormenting for months included the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county. Her war against us had just become something much more serious than a neighborhood dispute. The radio call that shattered my world came through at exactly 10:47 a.m. I was reviewing case files in my office when dispatch crackled with an urgent message. "All units, we have a domestic disturbance at 847 Meadowbrook Lane. 2 officers on scene requesting backup. Situation involves a minor child and possible trespassing complaint." My blood froze as I realized they were talking about my home address. My hands shook as I grabbed my radio and responded, "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Rodriguez. That address is my residence. What is the nature of the emergency?" "Sheriff, we have officers responding to a 911 call about an uncontrolled child threatening residents. The caller requested immediate police intervention to remove the child from private property." The papers I had been reviewing scattered to the floor as I bolted from my chair. Corinne had finally crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. She had weaponized law enforcement against my 8-year-old daughter, using the very system I had sworn to protect and serve. I ran through the courthouse hallway, my boots echoing off the marble floor as other officers and courthouse staff turned to watch their sheriff in full panic mode. My mind raced through horrible possibilities. What lies had Corinne told the 911 operator? How terrified was Emma? Were the responding officers treating my little girl like a criminal? "Dispatch, I am en route to my residence immediately," I radioed as I reached my patrol car. "Patch me through to the officers on scene." "Unit 23, please respond. Sheriff Rodriguez is requesting direct communication." The voice that came through my radio belonged to Officer Johnson, a young patrolman I had hired just 6 months earlier. Sheriff, we are on scene with a domestic situation involving a minor child. The complainant alleges that the child has been trespassing on HOA property and making threats against residents. My jaw clenched as I navigated through traffic, emergency lights flashing. Officer Johnson, that child is my daughter Emma. She is 8 years old and she lives on that property with me. What is her current status? There was a long pause before Johnson responded, and I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Sheriff, the child appears to be distressed. She is refusing to comply with our requests to accompany us for questioning. An adult male on the property claims to be her guardian, but we have not been able to verify his identity. That adult male was Miguel, and he was probably terrified that he was about to be arrested for trying to protect Emma. The situation was spiraling out of control because Karen had painted a picture of danger and criminality where none existed. Johnson, listen to me very carefully, I said, fighting to keep my voice professional despite the terror and rage coursing through my veins. Do not remove my daughter from that property under any circumstances. Do not place anyone under arrest. I will be on scene in less than 10 minutes to sort this out. Copy that, Sheriff. We will maintain the scene until you arrive. As I raced toward home, my mind filled with images of Emma being handcuffed or forced into the back of a patrol car by officers who thought they were following legitimate orders. The idea that Karen could manipulate the system so thoroughly that she could turn police officers into instruments of child abuse was beyond my comprehension. I grabbed my radio again. Dispatch, I need you to pull the 911 recording from the call that initiated this response. I want to know exactly what the complainant told your operator. Sheriff, the caller identified herself as Karen Mitchell, HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates. She reported that a juvenile was trespassing on private community property, acting aggressively toward residents, and refusing to leave when confronted. She claimed the child appeared to be unsupervised and potentially dangerous. Every word was a calculated lie designed to create maximum police response. Karen knew exactly which phrases would trigger an immediate law enforcement reaction. Words like aggressive, dangerous, and refusing to leave painted Emma as a threat rather than the innocent child she was. As I turned onto our street, I could see the patrol cars in my driveway and Karen standing in her yard like a spectator at her own personal entertainment. She had orchestrated this entire nightmare, and she was enjoying every moment of my family's terror. But as I stepped out of my patrol car in full sheriff's uniform, complete with badge and insignia of my authority, I watched Karen's expression change from satisfaction to absolute horror. The woman who had spent months trying to destroy a law enforcement officer's family was about to face the consequences of her actions. The responding officers immediately recognized their sheriff and began to understand how badly they had been manipulated. Emma broke free from Miguel's protective embrace and ran toward me, still sobbing but finally safe in her father's arms. Officers, I said in my most official tone, I believe we need to have a detailed conversation about the accuracy of the complaint that brought you to my property. With Emma safely in my arms, I turned my attention to the two officers who had responded to Karen's false emergency call. Both men looked deeply uncomfortable as they began to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. Officer Johnson, Officer Martinez, I said, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the rage burning in my chest. I need you to document everything that has occurred here today. Every statement made by the complainant, every action taken, every observation made. Officer Johnson pulled out his notebook with shaking hands. Sheriff, we had no idea that this was your daughter or your property. The 911 caller made it sound like we were dealing with a dangerous situation involving an uncontrolled juvenile. I understand that, Officer Johnson. You responded to what appeared to be a legitimate emergency call. But I want you to think carefully about what you observed when you arrived. Did you see any evidence that my daughter was trespassing, threatening anyone, or behaving dangerously? Officer Martinez spoke up, his voice filled with embarrassment. No, sir. The child was playing on what appeared to be her own property. She became upset and scared when we approached her. She was not aggressive or threatening in any way. As we spoke, I could see Corinne slowly backing toward her house, realizing that her moment of triumph was rapidly becoming her worst nightmare. But she was not going anywhere until this situation was fully resolved. Mrs. Mitchell, I called out, using my command voice that had been trained to stop people in their tracks. Please remain where you are. I have questions for you regarding the 911 call you made about my daughter. Corinne stopped moving, her face pale as she understood that she was now part of an official police investigation. The woman who had felt so powerful when she was manipulating the system from behind the scenes was not so confident when facing direct questioning from the sheriff himself. I handed Emma to Miguel and instructed him to take her inside the house. My daughter did not need to witness what was about to happen, and I needed to handle this situation with the full authority of my office. Mrs. Mitchell, you called 911 this morning and reported that a child was trespassing on private property and threatening residents. Can you explain to me what you observed that led you to believe this was an emergency situation requiring immediate police response? Corinne's voice was barely above a whisper. I saw the child playing near the fence line. She was making noise and disturbing the peace of our neighborhood. Playing near the fence line on her own property constitutes trespassing in your opinion. Well, I mean she might have been on HOA property. I pulled out my own notebook and began documenting her responses. Mrs. Mitchell, you told the 911 operator that my daughter was acting aggressively and appeared dangerous. Can you describe these aggressive and dangerous behaviors you witnessed? She was just being loud and disruptive. An 8-year-old child playing outside during daytime hours is dangerous behavior in your assessment. Corinne looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would rescue her from this interrogation. But the officers, Miguel, and even her own neighbors who had come out to watch were all staring at her with obvious disgust. Officer Johnson had been taking notes throughout our conversation, and I could see the realization dawning on his face. Sheriff, based on what we have observed and what the complainant is now stating, it appears that this 911 call may have been filed under false pretenses. I nodded grimly. Officer Johnson, I want you to research Mrs. Mitchell's history of complaints filed with various county agencies over the past 6 months. I believe you will find a pattern of false reports targeting my family. Over the next hour, we conducted a thorough investigation right there in my driveway. Officer Martinez contacted dispatch and requested copies of all previous calls involving our address. Officer Johnson interviewed Miguel and documented the harassment campaign that Corinne had been conducting for months. The evidence was overwhelming. Corinne had filed more than 20 false reports with various agencies over a 6-month period. Every single complaint had been investigated and found to be without merit. The pattern showed clear intent to harass and intimidate through abuse of government resources. Mrs. Mitchell, I said as the investigation concluded, You are under arrest for filing false police reports, harassment, and reckless endangerment of a child. You have the right to remain silent." As I read Corinne her Miranda rights, I watched the full weight of her actions finally register on her face. The woman who had terrorized my family for months was now facing serious criminal charges that could result in jail time, heavy fines, and a permanent criminal record. "Please," Corinne begged as Officer Johnson placed her in handcuffs. "This is all a misunderstanding. I was just trying to protect our neighborhood property values. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." "Mrs. Mitchell, you called 911 and reported false information that resulted in police officers attempting to remove a terrified child from her own home. Your actions traumatized an 8-year-old girl and wasted valuable emergency resources. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a calculated attack on my family." As the patrol car pulled away with Corinne in the back seat, neighbors from throughout Meadowbrook Estates began approaching me. One by one, they began sharing their own stories of Corinne's harassment and intimidation tactics. "Sheriff, she has been making everyone's life miserable," one neighbor explained. "She filed complaints about our children playing in our own backyard. She reported our dog for barking during normal daytime hours. We were afraid to say anything because she claimed to have powerful connections." The truth was finally coming out. Corinne had not just targeted my family. She had been terrorizing the entire neighborhood, using fear and false authority to control how people lived in their own homes. That afternoon, I received a call from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA Board of Directors. They had called an emergency meeting to discuss Corinne's removal from her position as president. The board had been unaware of her harassment campaign, and they were horrified to learn how she had been abusing her authority. Justice was finally being served, but the damage to my daughter's sense of security would take much longer to heal. 6 months later, Corinne Mitchell's legal nightmare was finally reaching its conclusion. She had been convicted on multiple charges including filing false police reports, harassment, and reckless endangerment of a child. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in county jail, 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and restitution for all the county resources she had wasted with her false complaints. The financial consequences were severe. Corinne's legal fees, fines, and restitution payments totaled more than $60,000. Unable to afford the costs while maintaining her mortgage, she was forced to sell her house and move out of Meadowbrook Estates in disgrace. The new HOA board, elected after Corinne's removal, took immediate action to repair the damage she had caused. They issued a formal written apology to my family and implemented new policies to prevent future harassment by board members. The HOA even voted to install a small playground near our fence line, recognizing that children playing outside was a normal and healthy part of community life. Emma's recovery took time and patience. The trauma of having police officers try to remove her from her own home had shaken her sense of security in ways that broke my heart. We worked with a child psychologist who specialized in helping children process traumatic experiences involving authority figures. Slowly, gradually, Emma began to feel safe again. The breakthrough came when Thunder, her favorite horse, seemed to sense her emotional pain and began staying close to the fence whenever she played outside. The gentle giant's protective presence helped restore Emma's confidence and joy. Today, Emma is 11 years old and thriving. She still helps me care for our horses every morning before school, and her laughter once again echoes across our pastures. The ranch has returned to being our sanctuary, a place of peace and family connection. I used our experience to develop training programs for other law enforcement officers about recognizing and responding to false emergency reports. Too many families have suffered because someone like Corinne decided to weaponize the system for personal vendettas. Officers need to understand how easily they can be manipulated into becoming instruments of harassment rather than protection. The case has become well known throughout our county as an example of how HOA power can be abused and how important it is for law enforcement to carefully investigate complaints involving children and family disputes. Several other families have come forward with their own stories of HOA harassment, and we have been able to help them find justice as well. Our neighbors in Meadowbrook Estates have become genuine friends. Without Corinne's toxic influence, the community has evolved into exactly what it was supposed to be, a place where families can live peacefully and children can play safely. Emma often asks me what happened to the angry lady who tried to take me away. I tell her that sometimes people make bad choices that hurt others, but that justice and truth always win in the end. Corinne learned that bullying innocent families has serious consequences, especially when you target the wrong family. As I watch Emma brush Thunder's mane in the golden light of another peaceful morning, I am reminded that some battles are worth fighting. Standing up to bullies is not just about protecting yourself. It is about protecting everyone who comes after you. Our ranch remains our sanctuary, but now it also stands as proof that ordinary families can defeat extraordinary cruelty when they refuse to be driven away from the lives they have rightfully built.